Hi, everybody. This is Gad Saad for the SAAD Truth. I received an email from a graduate student at the University of Chicago regarding some truly breathtaking realities that are taking place there regarding Title IX. For those of you who don't know what Title IX is, let me just read it for you here. It is part of the Education Amendments of 1972. Title IX specifically states, no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. Certainly, the manner in which it is worded there, most reasonable people would support such a statute. Of course, what ends up happening, though, is that there is grotesque overreach, especially in today's age of lunacy. And so some of you may have heard of some of the absolutely Orwellian, Kafkaesque realities that are taking place on university campuses, where university administrators are overreaching in truly baffling ways the rights of students under the guise of adhering to Title IX. Perhaps the most famous manifestation of this is the ordeal that Professor Laura Kipnis at Northwestern University faced when she wrote an article that was, in some sense, if I remember correctly, questioning some of the sexual hysteria or the hysteria associated with, the dangers of sexual assaults on campuses. Anyways, it was an article that she had written. She had every right to do so. And then she was brought up on charges of Title IX because somehow there was an argument that she was in violation of Title IX by virtue of her having written that article. This is, by the way, a woman who is a feminist, a staunch leftist. I think she described herself as a Marxist feminist. And I had supported her quite a while ago publicly. I think I'd even tagged Joe Rogan to try to get him to support her ordeal. This was quite a while ago, maybe last year, and I was happy to see that she was recently on Dave Rubin's show. So all that said, Title IX in spirit sounds like a very good idea, but when you then have social justice warriors on steroids engaging in overreaching, then it becomes a profoundly dangerous stick to hold. So let me read you here the email that I received from this graduate student. Now, this is at the University of Chicago. Now, this is quite astonishing, one, in that you could see, again, that Northwestern University, in the case of Professor Kipnis, and in this case, University of Chicago, so elite universities are certainly not immune to this just breathtaking Orwellian overreach. So let me just read you his email. I won't, of course, announce who he is. I won't identify the person in question. I say he, but actually I'm not committing to whether it's a he or she. And frankly, based on the name, I can't tell if it's a he or she. And apologies that I am succumbing to fixed binaries and biological essentialism, assuming that he or she can be one of two types. In any case, dear Dr. Saad, I hope it's not an overreach on my part to reach you at your academic email. I have been following your work for some time and think you will appreciate the significance of this message when most will probably find it trivial. As you know, U.S. universities that receive federal funding are required to administer a sexual harassment Title IX training to all employees and students. Nice. And as a PhD student, I had to take that online training. While I have my reservations about the programming and do not think it is the university's administration's prerogative to, quote, educate students or employees about social behavior and moral duties, the primary concern that I want to share with you is this. There are sections where certain morally subjective questions are asked, and the trainee has to choose between three options that are basically, quote, opinions. The disconcerting aspect of these questions is that the trainee is not allowed to move ahead in the training unless they choose the, quote, correct opinion. that aligns with that of the administration. To top it off, since the training is mandatory for registering in the next academic quarter, students' degrees are essentially held hostage to this exercise of social engineering. I mean, this is me speaking now, I'm not reading his email. It's baffling that I'm actually reading this. So there is a moral purity test, subjective one, that the university imposes on you as a preemptive measure of any downstream Title IX violations that you sexist rapists might engage in. And if you don't exhibit the correct opinion, then your degree is held. Sounds perfectly reasonable. I wrote to the Title IX coordinator voicing my disagreement with the training and also expressing my thoughts about how thought, however depraved, cannot be illegal. And the Title IX office is responsible for providing speedy justice to victims of violent action, not socially unacceptable thought. I was simply told that this training was mandated by the state and this is how they thought was the best way to go about it. When I pointed out the illegitimate nature of a few questions where one had to alter their opinion to complete the training and their degrees were held hostage to this, I unsurprisingly received no reply. And in a second, by the way, I will read you one of these questions. The student in question sent me screenshots of these. After discussing this with a few acquaintances, I feel that they have failed to recognize the danger that lurks behind these sorts of programming, so I'm reaching out to you. Mainly because I need to let this be known. By the way, for those of you who wonder how can I get engaged, well, this student got engaged. I'm not releasing his identity. You don't know who he or she is, but yet he or she found it sufficiently important to at least reach out to someone who would certainly take up the mantle and use whatever platform I have to address the matter. So this is what I mean by getting engaged. There are a million ways to get engaged, none of which involve you sitting quietly and idly on your couch. So get engaged. This student did. I don't expect to hear back from you. Well, I did respond back to the student in question, and I'm now doing a SAAD Truth clip using his courageous email. But do hope you get this information. Some screenshots of the training are attached with this email. All the best for your academic and socio-political endeavors. And of course, I won't share the person's name. Now, let me just read for you here some of the screens. So, how might you respond? Dressing and revealing clothing is a way for women to signal that they're willing to partake in sexual activity. So that's one option. Definitely, if a woman is wearing a revealing outfit, she can't complain if someone tries to take advantage of her. And then third option, no. The only way to be sure that someone is interested in hooking up with you is if they tell you so. So then, the screenshot, he or she chooses, dressing and revealing clothing is a way for women to signal that they're willing to partake in sexual activity. And then there is a guy, Jake, the advocate, a picture of some guy who says, that's a pretty big assumption. And even if someone is looking for sexual attention, it doesn't mean they want or deserve to be assaulted. Nobody said anything about assaulted. Making assumptions about people's sexuality based on their clothing is dangerous and unfair. Try to avoid it. So then the option that is provided, so whatever answer was given is the wrong answer. So then a good choice is given. No, the only way to be sure that someone is interested in hooking up with you is if they tell you so. There's a check mark. You got it. Wearing a revealing outfit doesn't count as consent for sexual activity. Nobody said it does. Judging people based on their clothing is generally not very smart, and when it comes to sexual activity, it can be dangerous. So let's go back, though, and check that particular, the one that was rejected, the one whereby the student's degree would be withheld until they answered correctly. Dressing and revealing clothing is a way for women to signal that they're willing to partake in sexual activity. Well, I published a paper in 2012, SAAD and Stenstrom, in the Journal of Consumer Psychology, a very prestigious journal, where we looked at the manner by which women dress as a function of where they are in their ovulatory cycle. And we demonstrated that when they are in the maximally fertile phase of their cycles, that's when they dress most provocatively. And of course, the argument for that is that it makes adaptive sense to engage in the greatest amount of signaling, sexual signaling, when you are maximally fertile. That's an evolutionary fact. That's a finding that we documented in the scientific literature. But here, if you agreed that dressing in revealing clothes is a way for women to signal that they are willing to engage, to partake in sexual activity, doesn't mean that you should be attacking them, doesn't mean that you should be harassing them. But is it true that women dress provocatively in part to signal something in the mating market? Well, the average toaster knows that to be true. But that would be considered wrongthink at the University of Chicago, and this student in question would not be able to register for the next semester until he provided the correct response. Slowly, we inch toward the abyss of infinite darkness, an abyss from which we might never be able to extricate ourselves from. Have a good day, everybody.